You come in carrying a quiet ache, the kind that sits low in the chest and hums like loose change in a pocket. The room remembers you, a kitchen table scarred by bills, a drawer of unopened envelopes, the soft stain where you once cried with your head on your hands. Ambition lives in your ribs, eager and bright, but it has been tempered by a hush, an inherited economics of scarcity spoken in kitchen voices. We can't afford that, save every penny, don't show off. Those phrases are not just memories. They are rules folded into the way you breathe, a ledger of guilt you keep folded under a mattress of dutiful choices. You try to be practical. You clip coupons, you say no when you want to say yes, you watch other people's abundance with a mixture of longing and accusation. At night, when the house is quiet, shame slips in disguised as humility. I don't deserve more, it's greedy to want. And guilt keeps you small in the name of gratitude, an old, misguided devotion that honors scarcity as virtue. You know the numbers, you understand the spreadsheets. What you don't know is why the yearning feels wrong, why success triggers an inner alarm, why generosity tugs at a cliff edge of fear. A smell of coffee, the soft scrape of a chair, these small sensory truths ground you in the present, but they also carry echoes, your grandmother's hands counting coins, your father's furrowed brow closing possibilities before they could be tried. These ancestral echoes have authority in your life, not because they are true now, but because you taught yourself to obey them for safety. And safety, you have learned, often sounds like denial. Listen, this is not indictment. It is an invitation to look without shame at the map you have been following. There is a deeper current steering your choices, a pattern that can be seen, named, and changed. If the ache in your chest recognizes itself in these words, stay with me. Like this message if it lands in your bones, subscribe and tap the bell to journey on. In the next moments, the first quiet messages from a wiser voice begin to appear, small, clear signposts that will ask you to separate spiritual truth from old stories. You sit at the kitchen table while dawn slips between the blinds, a quiet ledger open but rarely touched. The room smells faintly of coffee and old promises. Somewhere inside, a small voice begins to speak, not loud, but patient, like a map unfolding across the years. It says, look closely. These fears you carry were taught to you, passed down in hushed warnings and closed hands. They are stories, not commands. Listen. The first message is simple and tender. Shame has been wearing the costume of humility. You remember the comments that shrank your ambitions into polite resignation, be grateful with what you have, and how that gratitude was twisted into an excuse for underclaiming your worth. The voice unmasks the disguise, humility honors others, but shame hides. You name it aloud for the first time, this is not humility. This is fear. As you speak, your shoulders loosen, as if a small knot inside your chest has been recognized. Practical counsel arrives like a steady hand on your shoulder. Start small, the voice suggests. Track one recurring expense. Say no to one invitation that drains you. Set a gentle boundary. Open a journal and write the beliefs you inherited, then write the truth beneath each one. There is no magic pill, only slow, faithful habits that rebuild trust, between you and your decisions, between you and provision, between you and God. You practice receiving. At first it feels awkward, accepting a compliment, allowing a gift, keeping a windfall for growth rather than guilt. Setbacks come, a project flops, an impulsive purchase stings. When they do, the instruction is not condemnation but correction. Compassion for your past, discipline for your future. Learn the lesson, adjust the map, continue. Conversations appear, sometimes in prayer, sometimes in a mirror. You are not your mistakes, the voice insists. You are worthy of wise abundance. That sentence settles like a seed. If this resonates, press like to honor that seed, and subscribe with the bell to walk the rest of this path together. Ahead, you'll begin to reclaim worth in tangible ways, and the next steps will ask you to receive, steward, and let prosperity be an expression of purpose. The kitchen is quiet but for the soft tick of a wall clock and the rain tapping the window like an impatient hand. You sit hunched over a small ledger, numbers blurring into old stories. We never had extra, you must be humble, money corrupts. A voice, neither loud nor distant, surfaces, gentle as a hand on your shoulder. What do you carry when you think of money? It asks. You answer aloud, more to yourself than to anything else, fear, guilt, the sense I don't deserve. The voice doesn't chastise, it names what you've been taught. Those lessons were given to protect you from want, not to keep you small. The scene shifts inward, memory quick, a parent tightening the purse, a sermon that praised sacrifice above stewardship, a whispered warning that abundance invites vanity. The voice, like a map unfolding, points to the junction, shame disguised as humility, vigilance masquerading as prudence. You can hold dignity and desire together, it says. Humility doesn't require self-erasure. You feel the friction in your chest, years of restraint softening into recognition. The practical counsel arrives as clear, precise gestures. Name the belief and ask where it came from, check the story against what is true now, make a small, sacred experiment, a budget that honors needs and seeds growth, track a single generous act to see how abundance flows when permitted. A setback appears, cinematic and sharp, a bill arrives that you thought covered, a purchase you made in a moment of anxiety. Old guilt floods back. The voice leans in, this is not failure. It's information. Where you stumble reveals what needs compassion and what needs structure. You breathe, steadying. There is discipline here, yes, but held by kindness. You begin to separate the spiritual truth, God's care, your intrinsic worth, from the inherited myths that kept you anxious and small. Each small, faithful step feels like reclaiming a room in your own house. If this moment resonates, stay with it. There is a map ahead, practical and sacred, that will teach you how to receive and steward. If this touched you, show that you want the next message, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, so the next guidance arrives when you're ready to keep walking. Morning light finds you at the kitchen table again, the same stack of envelopes, the same thin coffee cooling beside your hand. This time you do not bury the feeling. You place a palm on the paper and listen. The message comes not as thunder but as a patient map, an inner geography laid out in landmarks you recognize, scarcity at the corner of your childhood, the alley of avoided choices, the hill where shame hides behind a polite face. A quiet voice says, name each place. You do, aloud, and the room shifts. A memory opens like a door, your mother counting coins on the linoleum, eyes tired, a prayer mumbled into the tally. Shame learned itself into thrift and restraint, then wrapped itself in virtue. Now the voice, soft, neither condemning nor sentimental, teaches difference. Humility is not poverty, it says. Stewardship is not guilt. You feel the old argument arise, but what about greed? The reply is steady, greed eats, gratitude gives. Both require discernment. You walk to the porch and the air tastes like rain. Practical counsel arrives in small, stubborn tasks. Name one financial fear and hold it up to the light. Write a ledger that speaks truth, not shame. Make a tiny promise to yourself and keep it, a $10 saving, a boundary with a friend, a moment of honest praise when a payment clears. Each act becomes a footstep off the worn path. The work is neither glamorous nor instantaneous, it is the labor of learning to receive without apology. In the afternoon a mentor appears in memory, a teacher who once said, God's abundance is not a reward but a capacity. You repeat that line, tasting its possibility. The shame that wore humility like armor begins to loosen, you can feel the muscles unknotting around your chest. Compassion moves alongside discipline, you forgive the younger self who hid money under mattresses and promise practical change. There is tenderness here, but also boundary. Messages from God clarify, you are not meant to hoard suffering to prove worth, nor to chase riches to fill an emptiness. Instead, you are invited to steward life with dignity. If this stirs something in you, linger, like this moment, and let the promise of the next step find you. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the choice that will change the rest of the journey. You sit at the same kitchen table where your grandfather once balanced ledgers by lamplight. The wood remembers the scrape of a pen and the small, private oath you made to never ask for more than you were owed. Morning slips through the curtains and the quiet ache in your chest stirs. A voice, soft, patient, begins to speak not in words but in images, a map unfolding, a thin line from the old ledger to a new horizon. It says, gently, that shame has been disguising itself as humility, that guilt has been braided into your sense of worth. You answer aloud, because saying it breaks the spell. What do you want me to do? You ask the room, the past, the unseen. The reply comes not as condemnation but as permission, to name the story, to separate the sacred from the story you inherited. A memory flashes, your mother saying money changes people, and behind it a truer line, a whisper that money is a tool, not a verdict. The distinction lands like rain on parched soil. Practical counsel arrives with the same tenderness. You make a list not of failures but of margins, a weekly accounting that honors rest as much as growth, a habit of giving that loosens the fist of fear, a plan for debt that treats past choices with compassion and current choices with clarity. You practice saying, I am worthy of provision, not as bravado but as a small, steady act of re-education. In the mirror, your reflection listens like a witness. There are setbacks. A bill arrives with a deadline that smells of old panic, and for a moment the old ledger's voice crescendos. You feel the familiar urge to hide, to shrink. But now you have a hand on your shoulder, self-discipline tempered by self-compassion, and you respond differently. You create a call script to negotiate a payment plan, you ask for help, you set a boundary on unnecessary spending. The moment is not triumphant, it is real. Each small victory rewrites one line in the ledger of your life. A friend sits with you by the window and speaks simply, what if God's voice is inviting you to steward, not to suffer? The window shows a street where people move with purpose and ordinary grace. The invitation settles, to align prosperity with purpose, to let integrity and generosity be the criteria by which you measure success. This is not a promise of overnight ease, but of gradual reclamation. If this message lands in you, trust it enough to respond, like from the heart, share the willingness to change, and subscribe so this conversation continues. Ahead, you'll meet the deeper practices that turn intention into habit, and the quiet reclamation that makes receiving feel holy rather than risky. You sit at the kitchen table while dawn paints the city in soft gold, the old ledger closed beside a mug that still breathes steam. In the quiet, a voice, older than your critique, kinder than your fear, sketches a map across the tablecloth. Where does your money story begin? It asks. You answer without words, the memory of a parent tightening their hands, a childhood promise to never ask for more, the small, hungry compromises you learn to call prudence. The voice does not judge, it points. Those traces are not you, it says. They are instructions you borrowed. Across the room, a plant leans toward the light, a small law of nature that feels like mercy. You remember the sermon you have heard as a teenager, the one that turned abundance into a moral test. Now the message comes back different, that abundance is stewardship, not sin, that receiving is as holy as giving. A dialogue begins inside you, a stubborn skeptic and a patient teacher. If I accept more, will I lose myself? The skeptic asks. The teacher answers plainly, you will find yourself. Worth is not a currency you earn, it is a present you reclaim. Practical steps arrive like steady stones across a river. Start with one account labeled for joy. Pray over it, not for miracles, but for clarity. Set a boundary that is, in itself, an act of love, a weekly check-in where you ask, did this choice honor my values? When guilt rises, name it. When shame tightens its grip, imagine placing it on a shelf and saying, I will return to you later, not to be controlled. The work is neither easy nor theatrical, it is consistent, humble discipline braided with tenderness. People appear in this scene, an old mentor who slides over a simple spreadsheet and says, balance begins with truth, a friend who tells you, I stopped apologizing for wanting a full life. Each interaction is a permission to expand. The map unfolds, faith that whispers limits and courage that opens doors. If this lands in your chest, hold that warmth. In the next moment, I will guide you through a concrete practice, one question to ask daily that rewrites your ledger. So if you want that next message, like this truth, subscribe, and ring the bell to keep walking this steady path together. You sit at the kitchen table as dawn slips between the blinds, the ledger of your life open beside a cup gone cold. Outside, the city wakes in ordinary abundance, buses, vendors, a woman with a stroller, while inside, the old ledger whispers the names of debts you never knew were yours: obligation, expectation, unspoken promise. The voice in your head repeats the same small sermon: enough is dangerous, wanting is unholy. Then another voice answers, quieter at first, as if coming from the hinge of the heart: you were made to receive. You look up as if to see who spoke and find no one there, only a light on the wall that feels like a hand. The narrative shifts into tenderness and clarity. Shame leans forward, familiar, in a sweater of self-judgment: you must earn every inch. You, now steadier, ask not to fight but to listen. Why do you hold me so small, you say? The answer is a story that belonged to your mother, to a scarcity that crossed oceans and names. A memory surfaces, a childhood kitchen where kindness came with conditions. The scene is simple but seismic: understanding loosens the knot. A small, practical counsel arrives like a neighbor's knock. Not a sermon of guilt, but a map: begin with one truthful ledger, one account of value that recognizes what you give and what you receive. Begin with a ritual, a weekly reckoning that honors both discipline and gratitude. In the margin, you write a promise to yourself: steward, not hoard. The divine messages that have been unfolding are not abstract, they translate into budgets with dignity, boundaries with generosity, and an internal practice of saying yes to provision without shame. Compassion walks with discipline. You practice saying, I am allowed to be prosperous, aloud, in the hush between trains, and the words change the architecture of your choices. Hope becomes a skill, practiced like prayer. The scene resolves with you closing the ledger, not to hide the truth but to hold it gently. There is a promise in the air, a promise that prosperity is not theft from the soul but an expression of it. If this resonates, let it land, like this moment, as an act of recognition. Subscribe and ring the bell to continue. Next, you will learn how to build a faithful system to receive, steward, and multiply what you've been given. The morning light finds you at the kitchen table, a simple lamp still warm from the night's work. You lay out a small ledger, a cup of coffee steaming like an offering, and the house holds a hush that invites truth. Across the page, you write the old sentences you believed about money: not enough, unearned, sinful, and as you speak them aloud a different voice answers, not harsh, but steady: those were borrowed stories. You were given a different one. The room fills with the quiet weight of recognition. You remember a conversation with someone who loved you, a line passed down like an heirloom: we don't flaunt what we have. It was meant to protect, and it protected you into an invisible shroud. Now, guided by a wiser counsel, you sit with that protection and thank it, then gently set it aside. You name the shame: I am not worthy. You place it on the ledger as a single entry, examine its footprint, and see how many decisions it has purchased for you. The revelation is both tender and fierce: once named, the shame loses its authority. Practical steps begin to feel like spiritual acts. You create a covenant with your resources: a small percentage to sow, a careful plan for debt, joyfully designated funds for beauty and rest. You imagine money as a river and your values as the banks that guide it. Discipline becomes a kind conversation with that river, not an act of punishment. In a brief, private ritual you bless each bill, each digital transfer, speaking, may this serve life, and feel the shift from scarcity to stewardship. Setbacks happen: an unexpected bill, an old impulse, and when they do, the voice of compassion is ready: begin again. You call a friend, you sit in prayer, you adjust the plan with humility and resolve. These small, repeatable acts build trust between you and the divine rhythm that supports prosperity. You see your life stretching into steady receiving, not sudden windfalls but faithful growth. If this resonates, hold to it, like what moves you, subscribe, and ring the bell so these reminders can find you. Ahead, we will put these practices into a daily blueprint, the small routines that carry dignity into every paycheck, every offering, every yes. By the time the sun spills through the curtains, you no longer flinch at the sight of your accounts. There's a quiet ritual now: a cup of tea, the worn notebook that used to feel like evidence against you, and a breath that steadies rather than shrinks. The ache that once sat heavy behind your collarbone still remembers the old stories, but something new has taken the lead: a steadier voice that traces each number with curiosity instead of judgment. In the kitchen, your partner places a hand over yours, no words are needed. The touch says, "We are learning how to receive." A message arrives, not thunderous but unmistakable, like a lighthouse blinking through morning fog. Worth is not measured by margin alone. You were meant to tend what you're given, the voice says, gentle as belonging. You rehearse the words aloud, tasting them, letting them rearrange the old ledger in your chest. The shame that once masqueraded as humility loses its authority when you call it by name. You begin to speak with clarity, setting prices that reflect craftsmanship, saying no to work that depletes you, accepting a contract that honors both your skill and your time. Each practical choice is an act of devotion, each boundary a prayer. There are stumbles. A friend jokes about your newfound confidence, an unexpected bill arrives. You falter, but the map you've been given is practical as well as divine. You return to small disciplines, a weekly accounting that feels more like conversation, a generosity plan that starts modest and grows, a mentor's practical counsel that teaches negotiation as stewardship, not aggression. Stewardship is not scarcity wearing a saint's robe, the mentor reminds you. It's faithful care. You smile because you understand now that discipline and grace are partners. One evening, a check arrives larger than you dared hope. Your first impulse is to tuck it away, to hide it from the small, worried parts of you. Instead, you breathe and let the impulse of gratitude move first. You allocate, you invest, you give. The muscles of receiving flex and strengthen. It feels like learning to walk again, awkward, miraculous, steadying. Around you, relationships shift, people notice the unhurried air you carry. If this story resonates, know that the next step is about keeping what you've reclaimed, how to expand without losing your center. If you feel the stirring of possibility, press like as a quiet yes, subscribe to walk the rest of the path with us, and ring the bell so the next message finds you the moment it arrives. You sit at the same table where old ledgers used to feel like small verdicts against you. Morning light now falls differently, softer, revealing dust motes that float rather than weigh. The voice that once sounded like obligation has grown quieter, another voice, patient and sure, has taken its place. It speaks not to shame you, but to invite you into practice. Name what you fear. Name what you want. Tend both with truth. A scene unfolds, you make a simple promise to yourself, to show up, as a steward, not a penitent. You draft a budget that reads like a declaration of values. Each line is a sentence in a new story, food as nourishment, work as vocation, savings as safety, giving as an outflow of gratitude. The ledger becomes a map, not a chain. Practical rituals appear, weekly reviews where you speak gently to the numbers, monthly meetings with a trusted friend who asks honest questions, small, disciplined choices that build momentum. You learn to let discipline carry compassion, and compassion inform discipline. There are moments of tenderness. You find yourself speaking aloud in the car, hands on the steering wheel, "I am allowed to receive." A response arrives not as thunder but as a calm clarity, an inner remembering that worth precedes work. Shame, when it comes, is met with a different posture, curiosity. Where did this story begin? Who taught you that scarcity equals humility? You trace the lineage of those beliefs with a steady hand and, like pruning a root, you cut away what no longer serves. Conversations with others change, too. You say no without flinching, you accept help without shrinking. You begin to fund small dreams, a class, a trip, a tool for your craft, and each funded dream strengthens the muscle of permission. Giving becomes a practice of alignment rather than performance, stewardship becomes joyful because it is honest. Visually, the world widens, a door once closed now rests on its hinge, light pooling on the threshold. There is still work ahead, systems to build, habits to consolidate, fears to reframe, but the pace has shifted from desperate reach to steady tending. As you stand, keys in hand, there is a soft knock at the other side of that door, a new invitation waiting to be opened. You step back into the light of a room that feels new because you are new in it. The ledger you carried for years, pages crowded with shoulds and apologies, lies closed on a wooden table, the pencil beside it unsharpened. Outside, rain has stopped, the city exhales. In the quiet, a voice like a memory and like a promise says, you were never meant to live small. It is not a shout but a steady calling, the same message you began to hear in Act 2, dignity precedes dollars, worth precedes wallet. You inhale and feel shame loosen, as if a seam you have been tugging at finally gives. You remember the tender work that got you here, the morning you named the stories that weren't yours, the afternoons you kept commitment to practical habits, the nights you forgave yourself and rose again. Those small acts were not small at all. They were prayers that built muscle. Prosperity arrives not as lightning but as a series of true choices, saying yes to your gifts, saying no to toxic scarcity, signing your name to agreements that honor both heart and ledger. God's messages become less like commands and more like directions: steward well, sow generously, receive with gratitude. In the space that opens, opportunities look different. Money becomes a tool that carries the imprint of your values, giving becomes a natural extension of receiving, discipline feels like care rather than punishment. You can picture conversations you will have, clear, calm, rooted. You can see a future budget that honors joy and obligation alike. You know setbacks will come, you have learned to meet them with curiosity and compassion instead of shame. If this voice reached you tonight, let it be a beginning and a promise, you will practice these truths and watch them compound. If the honesty of this journey stirred something in you, press the like, let that be the soft yes that keeps you moving. If you want steady guidance as you walk out of the old stories into faithful abundance, subscribe and ring the bell. I will bring practical wisdom and gentle accountability to the next step. Keep your ledger close enough to tend, loose enough to breathe, and come back. The road ahead asks for steady feet and an open heart.